Hi everyone. We are starting our third module today, Power and Politics in Art. And just as we do for every other module, we are first going to start in the ancient world. And then next week, we'll move on to the same theme in the modern world. And here are our objectives for this module. We want to consider the relationship of art to politics and political power while considering, of course, form, style, intention, and the historical context of a work of art, all under that umbrella of politics. We are also going to analyze the connotations, the similarities and differences between the terms art and propaganda. Oftentimes, we think of those two ideas as being mutually exclusive, or one is aesthetic and the other one is just utilitarian, but I actually want to challenge those categories and really complicate them for us. Finally, we're going to see how race, class, and gender play into expectations about political art and expressions of power in both the ancient and the modern worlds. All right, we're going to start back in ancient West Asia, in ancient Mesopotamia. And if we look at these maps here, we're in far West Asia, between the Persian Gulf, the Mediterranean. If we're looking at this map, it'd be kind of over here, the Caspian Sea. This is often called the Fertile Crescent, the cluster of different cultures that emerged between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in present-day Iraq. All right, and we're going to start in Sumer. Religion was a controlling power in Sumer. And the religious practice really grew out of daily demands. Every possible natural disaster happened here, and it determined the life and death of the people. So each city-state of Sumer, places like or Eshnunna, had their own local natural god with a priest king as the god's earthly representation. And here we're looking at these little votive figures. These are clay-fired kind of small statues, freestanding sculptures that are left in temples as a kind of way to honor the local deities. And temples were placed on the top of these large platforms called ziggurats. The Nana Ziggurat of still exists today, and this above is an archaeologist's reconstruction of what this would have looked like in its entirety. We can see all these kind of ramped paths leading up to this tiny temple at the top. Temples are not supposed to be inclusive places for everyone to access, but instead temples were very exclusive places, really only for the very powerful, the most politically connected, to perform important religious rituals. We have, in the modern world, we often think of the state and religion as being separate institutions that should stay separate. But here in Sumer, in ancient West Asia, religion and state go hand in hand. The ziggurat itself is actually just the platform. It's not the small temple building. And this ziggurat, this is a solid structure. It would be a huge kind of earthen solid mass that would then be covered by these clay bricks fired in a kiln to create the uniform facade that we see here. The standard of also, I think, really drives home this notion of how much power, how much say really the local ruler had over the inhabitants. A standard, this is about a kind of backpack sized wooden box that's pretty narrow, and on each side, we're looking at one side here, the other side down below, we see these horizontal registers that depict a scene. And in both registers, we see all of these people lined up. In fact, a lot of them look very cookie cutter, right? And here we have this row of advisors sitting, but in each side of the standard, we see one figure. Here he is in the middle, here he is over here, who's a little bit bigger, a little bit taller than the other figures. This is called hierarchical scale, where someone is shown proportionately much larger, out of scale compared to other people, to express the significance, to express the power of that figure. So this is the king that we see. And in fact, his larger than life figure is, I think, highlighted because look at his head. This decorative border here, he's actually so much taller than the other figures. His head actually pierces that border here and here to really emphasize that use of hierarchical scale. And what we see in these, scenes are, this is tax day in ancient Sumer. People are lining up to pay their taxes, to pay their tribute to the king. And those taxes come in the form of produce and livestock. And the king is shown here, as I said, with his seated advisors kind of feasting, enjoying all of this bounty that's coming into them. And of course, if you're going to have this much control over local populations, you need a big army to back you up. And so let's take a look at the other side shown here in the lower left. This is the military force that is backing up the political authority of the king. We see chariots, we see soldiers lined up with spears and armor, all to support him. Another area of ancient Mesopotamia, besides Sumer, we see all of these other kind of different cultural groups, the Assyrians, the Akkadians, and their independent city-states. We're going to move a little bit northwest of Sumer to the city of Babylon, where we see another example of a local ruler using visual culture, using here this sculpture to assert his authority. This is a stele. A stele simply means upright slab. That includes all of this big bulk of text here written in cuneiform. This is one of the oldest written languages found on Earth, and it describes all the laws. What we see is the ruler himself, Hammurabi, the standing figure here on the left, he is appearing before the sun god Shamash, who is seated here enthroned. And again, this is a great example of hierarchical scale, because if Hammurabi stood up, think about how much taller and bigger he would be than Hammurabi. It's important that the ruler chooses to show himself with Shamash. It's kind of giving legitimacy to his own authority to say, these aren't just my laws, but Shamash approves of them too. And the cuneiform characters spell out laws that concern all aspects of life: commerce, property, crime, marriage, inheritance. I mean, these are all of the areas of laws that still regulate our society today. The law code of Hammurabi is also where the notion of an eye from an eye comes from. So it says here, if a man puts out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. Dowries are also included here as well. So if a woman doesn't produce any sons and then dies, her dowry must be returned to her family of origin. When we think about authoritarian rulers in the ancient world, of course, we have to talk about the pharaohs, the kings of ancient Egypt. And so we're going to pick up there in the next video.